Today I'm talking to Nick from Nick Lewis Communications, and we're going to be talking about social media in general.
Okay. Oh, yeah. So thanks for joining me, Richard. I just thought it'd be a good opportunity for us to share our views online and our experiences of using social media to help promote the work and products and services of our clients, especially as I don't think there's really much of a general chit-chat online away from the sort of social media experts about just the everyday challenges people face or encounter when using the social networks to promote their services. I mean, I think one of the things I've learned over the last year and a half is just how time-consuming Facebook can be in terms of running and sustaining a good Facebook campaign for a company or a product or a service. And I think what you mentioned to me before is there is this illusion, isn't there, that social media is free, but it depends on how you cost things, and costing one's own time should always factor in any kind of professional enterprise. And if you were to take that alone, I think running a successful Facebook campaign does take a lot of time, effort, and I think it's a matter of sustaining that effort as well. And I just wondered what your own thoughts or experiences are of having used Facebook either in a professional or personal capacity vis-a-vis company pages and things like that.
I've always felt, and this may be a sort of selfish expression of this, that the real issue is with the design of a common platform. It suits the people who create them. So I mean, Facebook, be it Twitter, and of course it suits a lot of people that they've got a common platform on which they can see and they can look at things. So from a viewer's perspective and an ease of use perspective, as a private user, I think that people very easily understand what Facebook is about or what Twitter is about. I think from a business point of view, it's entirely different, isn't it? Because when it comes to a business, there's something different going on here. You're not just saying, "Hi, Nick, have a look at this photograph of me on the beach." You're saying, "Hi, Nick, I'd like you to be interested in my business." And as you said, getting people interested in your business, using the old marketing premises, is about attracting attention, interest, desire, all these sorts of things. That takes time and it takes effort. Nothing comes free, does it?
No, certainly not. And I think you make a very valid point that the personal use of Facebook and the professional use of Facebook often get confused. And given the nature of how Facebook operates with EdgeRank and other things like that, the fact that Facebook gives a precedence for native content or content uploaded directly to Facebook, and the predominance images get over written text or links to external content, lead people to post quite a lot of images from company pages, which do get nominally quite a lot of engagement. But I always wonder what actual value it adds to either the business or to the recipient. I mean, occasionally you add to the pages that I like as a personal individual, I just sort of see the usual internet memes being shared with some kind of witty comment, which kind of, it's got a tangential relationship with that business product or service. And I'm aware that it's appearing in my news feed because that's the way Facebook works and it gives predominance to these images. But does it really enhance the intended audience's experience of that company, and does it really reflect that well on the company itself? I mean, what's your take on it? Am I just being sort of unnaturally small c conservative on this?
I think you told a great story to me a little bit earlier today, which is really the story of what happened to you when you posted, your own advertisement in Facebook.
Yes.
We'll come back to that in a minute. But and the gist of that story was that everybody then promptly complained that you'd advertised. Now that seems. Go on, you tell the story. You tell it.
Well, I mean, it's slightly different because this is paid for advertising on Facebook, as some of the viewers of this YouTube recording may know. You can actually pay for your Facebook post, to appear in the news feed of people who do not follow or like your page, so it just kind of appears unbidden. And I did a general advert for my services aimed at people in Swansea, and someone complained. They commented saying, "Why am I being bothered with this advert? I do not like your page." And I had to explain that it was actually a paid-for advert by Facebook, and it's going to be more so the case going forward. That
doesn't that reflect the psychology of these things? I think this is really important.
Yeah,
the message for us as businesses, and the message being that people, I mean the viewers now, the public, the people who you want as a business to see your message, don't like advertising being sent at them. They feel that somehow these services are entirely free.
Yeah, I think we've got to make the distinction though between the adverts which people almost willingly consent to receive, and those such as the one I just described earlier, which I paid for. And I think, you know, when we talk about people liking products or companies or services on Facebook, they almost consented to being bombarded with advertising from those people. You know, you can like anything from. Well, it's a bit of a weird thing, because obviously your likes do appear somewhere on your personal Facebook profile, and I think it's almost like sort of brand identification, in the same way that people walk around with sweatshirts with the designer or shop's name sort of emboldened in sort of 48 font on their chest. People think sort of similarly when they're sort of almost customizing their Facebook presence, that, you know, I like Jack Daniels, therefore this reflects on me. I sort of subscribe to the brand values of Jack Daniels. And I mean, in a more prosaic way, I mean, you've got obvious things such as liking certain actors or films or pop groups or rock groups, and people sort of try and buy into this, you know, as it's kind of, I associate myself with these brand values, you know, by someone deliberately liking, I don't know, a Marks and Spencer's page or a Waitrose page, you could sort of almost determine quite a lot about that person from those likes.
I think that's true about the audience. I think if you remember where we started from, it's really about the almost like the values to business of doing this, and maybe by extension the problems that there would be for a business. Don't you think that part of the problem here is, and this comes back to time and effort in terms of doing this, is that you've got to make an advertisement, because that's what it is, even if it's part of your Facebook timeline or whatever it is, you've got to make it interesting and attractive. I mean, if we all had, you know, cats that did entertaining things in our business, we'd probably do wonderfully well online, wouldn't we? Because of the number of people who come and see it. People, I think we shouldn't underestimate the person who looks at this. They're well aware when there's an advert being sent to them, and they're well aware what is just pure entertainment. And most people who are on Facebook are looking for the entertainment side, aren't they? They're looking to associate socially with people who are sharing information. But there are situations where things like events and so on that businesses run, activities, sponsorship and so on, stories like that, that are valuable to viewers. And that, I think, is where businesses can touch in, and where their time and effort will be rewarded in terms of the response they get.
Well, it depends on the type of business and service, of course. I mean, I think a lot of business-to-business companies are, I personally think, wasting their time on Facebook.
Well, I was going to ask you that, whether that was a good place for, you know,
but in some ways,
sell its services to a big company. You know,
but B2C companies which try and engender sort of aspirational values of their brands, I mean, the advertising becomes the entertainment. I mean, you just think about all the buzz you've had about the Christmas television adverts for your John Lewis and your Marks and Spencers you've had this year, but primarily not so much how they appear on television, the fact they get released online first of all, and then people share them online and comment about them online, and you have, you know, managing directors appearing on things like the Radio 4 Today program, citing the social media metrics as a sign of success, almost as if television companies cite the audience figures for certain programs.
Almost as if they knew about it, understood it as well.
Yeah, almost as if they understood it as well. But the fact that people are giving this credence, and people are wanting to like or share the John Lewis advert, I mean, obviously that's an incredibly effective form of advertising. If people are willing to advertise on your behalf, I mean, that's half the battle won. And I suppose, depending on the scale of your business, you can sort of, or the intended audience of your business, you can develop a very effective Facebook campaign, which actually, in its truest sense, does have a viral element to it. And I think that's what a lot of companies want to do, isn't it? They want to use Facebook, but not necessarily have to pay Facebook for them to get that sort of market penetration that they want.
Do you think that's, you and I have had this discussion before, and I'm going to express an opinion about the way I think the web is going in general here, which is that we should not we should recognize the fact that the people who create these things, the people who create Facebook, the people who create Google, the people who create Bing, create Twitter, they are interested in the money of the businesses that are there. They need something to fuel their expansion and to make them bigger if they're going to succeed.
Yes.
So we should never disillusion ourselves and say that these things are entirely separated in a way I think that the public sometimes think they ought to be. And coming back to your comment about the amount of time that it takes to run a successful campaign, if you're not going to pay to be number one, if you're not going to pay to have your advert in my face on Facebook, so to speak, if you're not going to pay to have my advert on Google coming up there or to rank me highly, you're going to have to work incredibly hard and increasingly hard to get the same attention. The point being that it's not just you, it's not just me who's promoting my message, it's the 100,000, other people who are all vying for that space and for that attention, that viral attention in the same way.
You need to have the initial momentum and buzz for your social media campaign to take off. Success begets success. I mean, I think I mentioned earlier Facebook's EdgeRank algorithm, which calculates which posts appear in your newsfeed when you log into Facebook. And one of the elements of that is it looks at how many times people have either commented, shared, or liked that post, and how many times you have liked or commented on content from that page in the past. And the natural extension of that is if someone is commenting a lot on a particular brand, or all your friends are commenting on a particular brand, the chances of that post, or let's call it what it really is, an advert appearing in your news feed, is incredibly high. But you need to have that momentum or that massive interest for you to have a successful Facebook campaign. And I think if you're a smaller company or smaller business, it's easy to think, right, from my own personal Facebook use, when I log in, I see that Jaguar Cars or Coca-Cola or Jack Daniels or whoever is trying to sell me things and appearing in my newsfeed, I can easily replicate that for myself or for my own business interests. And I think you always need to have quite a lot of perseverance and maybe a bit of advertorial spend with Facebook to get that initial momentum going, unless you're an incredibly well-established brand anyway with lots of connections who you can cajole to like and comment on your page from the off. And I think there's very few examples I can really think of where you've actually got that inbuilt goodwill and that kind of proactivity of your kind of colleagues or acquaintances. I mean, you do have to open your wallet. And in terms of Nick Lewis Communications itself, I occasionally pay for advertising, because I try and target people in my immediate geographical region. And it's very telling, looking at the analytics I get back from Facebook, that when I am advertising, the reach and engagement I get on my general Facebook posts are a lot higher than they are when I'm not running a campaign.
Yeah.
And also, sorry, Richard. You go first.
No. The one thing that people aren't aware of too, of course, is that Google are just about to move to exactly the same platform as Facebook with their new carousel launch, which is again going to major on the approval of people, because this is what we're talking about here, is in terms of the number of people who like, and I know they use their +1 variation of this, but it's essentially the same, the number of people who like and who buy into that thing as a measure of who should be top of the agenda. And alongside that, of course, they have their paid up model, which is even more obvious, I think, than Facebook's, isn't it? That's one of the issues with Facebook, is the paid-up model isn't immediately obvious to a business how that works. With Google, it is more transparent,
it,
they had AdWords to buy, and that working, and being on the right-hand side of the page or at the very top, the paid listings for a longer period of time. But I think it's very important for businesses in terms of their social media to understand that sometimes the best way to be top is to pay money to be top.
Yeah, I agree with that in principle, but I think, with the caveat that exactly what you're paying for and what you hope to achieve with that expenditure. One of the advantages of social media advertising, especially things through Facebook, is the reason why Facebook wants to know every single last personal detail when you log in to Facebook. I mean, if you haven't filled in all the fields in your personal profile, it always reminds you, why haven't you told us where you've been born or where your hometown is and everything else, is Facebook uses anonymously that information to help advertisers target you. So if you're paying for a certain post to reach a certain person, you can do so. I mean, I can say I want to target men between ages of 20 and 30 who live in Port Talbot, who have got an interest in cars, and I can guarantee, depending on how much I'm willing to spend, that post would appear in front of every single one of those people, whether it be like 500 or 10,000.
I think you hit on a very valuable business. That I think you and I are not disagreeing here. I think you hit on the ways that social media can work. The real question is, at what point does it stop being social media, if that is the case, and become purely a marketing exercise in a conventional sense? I don't think there's an issue with the way businesses use it.
I think people, no one pays to use Facebook in a personal capacity at the moment, and I think for people to complain that adverts appear in Facebook is both naive and, sort of, for want of a better word, ungrateful. You're getting a service for free, and it's not like access to Facebook and the way Facebook changes the information. It's not like some kind of human right being violated here. It's a business like any other.
I think that issue is where there is a confusion in the providers form that they run a risk of here. That is the suppliers of Facebook themselves, the suppliers of Google and so on as well, tread a little bit of a dangerous line here if they don't admit the fact that actually you are going to get advertising on your page. There's nothing wrong with putting it on your page, but it's there all the time, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
You can't, when the television adverts come on, I can choose to walk out of the room and go and get a cup of coffee or whatever it is. In a sense, if I want to use Facebook, I can't avoid it. And I think that people need to be aware that that model will become increasingly pressing. What's going to happen when Twitter floats? Well, what's going to happen when it does float, when Twitter want to start to pay their shareholders money back?
I think really the most insidious element for me, or the only insidious element, is that under Facebook's new privacy policy, as I understand it, I read an article about it on the Daily Dot the other day, is that the content you post on Facebook as an individual can be repurposed by Facebook and other companies who you give the consent to use your Facebook material to in their own advertising.
That worries me too, because as a designer, the issue of intellectual property is extremely important, and there is this conflict, isn't there? If Facebook were a genuinely public body, not a profit body, then I'd be happy to share my beautiful photograph or whatever it was with them. Because it's making money, then I'm more reluctant to do it unless they're prepared to pay me to use it.
And I think that's. And it's not just Facebook, it's everyone who devises apps for Facebook. So when you are sort of, innocently doing one of those quizzes, how Welsh are you, how Northern are you, you actually are
Nick, you're spending a lot of time on
when I'm also meant to be getting on with work. When you actually are undertaking those kind of things, there's always that kind of caveat, tick the box. And what people don't realise is by ticking that box, you're actually letting that app developer use all your Facebook information in pretty much any way that they want to, or your contacts in any way that they want to, and you kind of give away a lot of permission. With the material.
I think that again is if you is an issue. I mean, I'm just going to talk about the security side of it, and then maybe we can just move on from this.
Yeah.
It is the security side of it is that generalized sharing of information is that people, I think, genuinely are not aware of what it is that they are sharing. They're also not aware of what it is they can do to prevent sharing of of all that piece of information they want. I mean, you can untick boxes as well as tick them.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's the sort of overall, I accept your terms and conditions thing that nobody reads, because those terms and conditions are never really easily and well explained to them to understand what it is they're signing away. And of course, all of us would also say it's slightly insidious, because I'm signing this way almost by accident, aren't I?
Yes.
I didn't realize you were going to pass it on to a third party.
Yes, I mean,
and then we accuse them of causing a fuss. But I think maybe rightly, because I think the big companies who operate this are happy to take advantage of our willingness to sign away our rights, really, one way or another.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's by the by. I'm
sort of.
I think that this model, that's the point in terms of coming back to almost the point in hand, this model of raising money from businesses is going to become increasingly prevalent. The free web will become less free. I mean, in terms of the user's going to have to accept the fact that in return for all this content being provided for them, free of charge as a viewer, that somebody's going to pay for it and they're going to expect a return.
Well, it's going to be a point, isn't it, where you think about a lot of the major news providers which give content away for free at the moment. I'm surprised we haven't got a point yet where paywalls have become more relevant for newspaper sites. I mean, it's going to come a point when The Guardian can't afford to give every single article that it does for free.
You say this, but I think there are two models that are being created, yes? There are two genuine models on the web that we should pay attention to. There is the Wikipedia BBC model. Now, I know the BBC is subscribed to by the taxpayers of the UK, but it's essentially about a subscription that nobody notices. It's taken away before we even knew it was taken. And if you would take Wikipedia, which essentially relies on volunteer information and very few permanent people to produce it, and I think that model will exist because there are people who are determined to drive it through. And then there is the advertised model, isn't there, which is the other one we're talking about. Now, those adverts can be transparent. Facebook, along the right-hand side, Google, or so on as well. Or like The Guardian, they're sitting there in the bottom left-hand corner winking at us, aren't they, encouraging us to buy our insurance or whatever it is. But the products that will fail will be the ones who can't attract enough revenue. That's what the customer's got to be aware of. If The Guardian's going to stay online, or one of those newspaper types, and you're going to carry on getting it free, then the fact is you're going to see more adverts rather than less, because they've got to survive.
Well, it also depends on actually what it takes to actually generate something like The Guardian. I think there's going to be a matter of, does it actually have, can it match its overheads with its income? And you think, with the old newspaper model, it was guaranteed a certain amount of money, but can it match that revenue with online advertising alone? I don't know.
Well, if it doesn't, it will cease to exist. I think that's really the point I was trying to say, because that's the nature of the web, isn't it?
I mean, I can't remember the statistics off the top of my head, and I don't want to sort of give a false impression, but my understanding is the financing could be viewed as being quite precarious at the moment, and you do wonder, even though a lot of people bemoan the fact that Rupert Murdoch tried to move the Times to a paywall, in the same way that people bemoaned about the move to Wapping in the 1980s. Actually, it turned out to be the ultimate, the short-term savior of the newspaper industry, because it actually managed to make the overheads manageable in terms of that business model. So I wonder, there'll be a point when people say, yes, we have to embrace the paywall.
Yeah. What about sort of coming back to social media? But what we're talking about here is two models, aren't here?
Yeah.
I say three models, isn't there? There's one we consider entirely free. Sorry to go back to the Wikipedia one, which is how people see the web, by the way, as entirely free as a user. And then there are subscription models. Now, people have been very resistant to subscription models. It's been quite profitable for the New York Times to go to that, but it's probably meant that they have far less readers than they would have done than, for example, the Daily Mail does, which is an advertised model.
Which is the most popular online newspaper in the world, I believe.
That's right. Yeah. And then you have the choice of the social media channels, yes, social media being something new, isn't it? Something that really is different again, about what line they follow. I mean, do you think people at Pinterest or somewhere like that would subscribe to a subscription version of that?
I think
they would, and I'll tell you why. Yeah, or there will be ways of getting your services. Let's take Google, for example. Yes, Google has unpaid services which it offers the world, but it's also increasingly offering people like you and me, and not just businesses, but private individuals. Oh, take out more space. We'll store it for you for £25 a year. Okay, I mean, server space is incredibly cheap. They make good money out of this as a result of doing it. That's your subscription, even though you don't recognize it as such.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. People say the internet's free, but even if you're going into a sort of internet cafe and paying 50p, I mean, you are paying for the internet. The moment you buy a device, I mean, we're not viewing the internet through through the air, through an invisible ether. We're watching it on a laptop or a mobile phone device or a tablet. You have to pay for the Wi-Fi connection at home. I mean, what people forget, and this goes into another conversation which we might have in a moment about, is social media free, is that even before you register for something like a Facebook account, you already are paying for the internet. You already are paying for social media, whether it be your mobile phone contract and data usage, or your landline and your router at home. I just think it's the notion that people expect the content to be free.
Well, I think that's because they identify the fact that they're playing Virgin Media or BT or wherever it is a subscription for that line. Do you know what I mean? Because that's how it appears with the television set, isn't it?
Yeah.
I pay my television license, then it appears free. But I mean, coming back to social media, with these sorts of various models that are there, they're then saying, well, as well as that, you'll now need to take out your magazine subscription because this is your interest, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I wonder with social media, and here's a possible thought, that no matter how good they are, the individual social media items, Facebook's incredibly popular, isn't it? Whether there will come a point where somebody will simply say on the other side, right, I will start up something different because, and offer an unpaid model for people, so people will then jump ship from Facebook or wherever it is onto whatever the latest equivalent is.
Well, if we were having this conversation in 2006, we'll be talking about how to make the most out of MySpace. Where is MySpace now, apart from being a pet project of Justin Timberlake's? And I mean, Facebook, because of the brand recognition, the fact it's had a Hollywood movie made about it alone will ensure the name will always exist one way or another. It will transmute to whatever products it will be. It's got brand recognition. But as we use it today, I mean, is it really going to stay the same? No, I mean, we're already seeing that. I think the future of social media interaction is going to be predominantly visual.
I was going to say, we haven't even discussed that, have we, Richard?
No, I mean, the idea of expecting people to read blogs is probably going to be slightly archaic, and the fact that you and I are having and recording this conversation right now is testament to the fact that we see that the landscape is changing. That if we want to communicate with people are now going to expect sort of online audio-visual content they can digest.
Well, well, hang on. Whoa. Yes, I'm just going to stop you there a minute, because doesn't this come back to some of the fundamentals of communication? Yes, and that there are good ways of getting your message over, and so often people confuse the message and the medium that they're doing it on, and that is sometimes it's extremely good to do a video. But if this was an instructional video for half an hour telling people how to assemble an IKEA table, it wouldn't really be very good. The reason
depends being how complicated the table is.
Well, with me, every one of them is very complicated.
Yes.
But you get my point here, yes, is that the more technical it gets, the less a video, for example, is suited to it. And the businesses have really got to concentrate their messages, communicating their messages in the right way. Now, having said that, it might be multiple ways of doing it. So actually, the IKEA table, doing a video of it and providing you with a set of instructions might work considerably better than the rather useless set of instructions and Allen key they provide you with at the moment.
Yeah, and the thing of a video is you can always pause it, can't you? I mean, you're not expected to press play and then it runs for 30 minutes. You can actually fast forward and rewind, to use archaic terms, to get to the point that you want. And I see a lot of online videos now which in the description got the time listing. If you want to see Joe Bloggs talking about the following topic, skip to 10 minutes 21 seconds.
Yeah.
And I think people are getting quite savvy with that. I mean, I think one interesting thing about when we talk about online content is how much attention do people actually have. And I read a very good article the other day, I think it was probably in The Guardian itself actually, about how we've got this kind of really extreme divergence in popular culture between the micro messaging, people like Twitter and things like that, and then other viewing or reading habits where you get people committing themselves to television box sets of 24 hours, or whether it be The Killing or the US version of House of Cards. So people are either wanting sort of incredibly immediate digestible information, or they want the complete immersive experience, go away and read all 7 volumes of Game of Thrones, and it seems to be the middle ground which is losing out. So it's either you're sort of giving people the instant fix and the instant information that they need, here you go, or it is right, you are settling down for a 10-hour experience which you'll consume in whatever pattern that you want. And I think that poses some interesting questions. I mean, for example, we're, not to get too postmodern about this, but we're recording this video to see if anyone would be interested in our own conversations. And this is going to be one of the longer videos that we're going to be posting online compared to some of the shorter, more instructional ones. And it'll be interesting to hear back from whether anyone is sitting down and consuming or watching this conversation in its entirety, or whether people actually prefer the shorter vignettes that we have, which is just getting to the point in a very targeted way about the information that they're trying to retrieve. So it would be telling. And also I think the other thing is, going back to visual content over other forms of medium, is in the same way that there was a boom in the written blog in the end of the 90s, 2000s, as this democratization of blogging tools. I think the advent of things like Google Glass and mobile phone technology means it's so much easier to just record video of a sufficient quality and upload it straight away to things like YouTube.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? The big takeoffs at the moment are online phone things that only last 5 or 6 seconds, aren't they? They give you no time at all to do that. In terms of public posting, that's where video presentation is what we call video, chat, human to human conversation sort of is at the moment. But I guess in a way I'm not trying to keep on circling this back to this. All we're really saying at the moment, that probably makes it even more confusing for a business user than it was when you just had to blog, if that makes any sense.
I mean, I think ultimately you need to have a core marketing or branding strategy which you extrapolate according to the medium, and you always refer back to that.
What about what I consider is the, I'm speculating here, the thing that doesn't exist yet, but which is the tool that allows you to mix media really well and really satisfactorily. Now, Google allows me to post blogs and things like that very satisfactorily. YouTube, their video channel allows me to link video in it very well, but what it doesn't allow me to is to interlace the two very well without being rather professional at doing it. And maybe the younger generation is a bit quicker than I am in terms of doing this. But that seems to me where the tool lies for businesses as well, is that in the development of tools that allow them to do this in a natural way, because that's one of the big issues that comes back to this advertising point. Advertising is sort of unnatural, isn't it? It's in our life, but we drive past posters, we see it on TV, but we're used to ignoring it.
Yes.
We are used to ignoring it.
I think the fact is, are we subconsciously ignoring it? Probably not. I mean, if we want to be somewhat sinister and cynical about this, I mean, advertising has its roots in totalitarian regimes' propaganda, and the most effective propaganda is the type that you're not aware is actually propaganda. So the fact that we walk down the high street and probably see the Coca-Cola logo about 20 times but not actually register it doesn't mean it hasn't been effective. If anything, it's just reinforcing something which is already there as a sort of overlaying message. I mean, it's the soft power advertising, and I think
that's the truth in business too, isn't it? The things that you mostly have to see things many times before they start to be branded.
and that's where the strength of social media comes in, because for businesses, because when you log into Facebook and you kind of see a post by whatever page that you like, you may not necessarily click on it, but your mind has been reminded of the existence of that brand, and that is that constant, level of reinforcement of recognition that when it comes to you wanting to buy something which that company may offer, your mind may naturally sort of gravitate towards, I'll go to B&Q for that, because you've seen the B&Q posts for the last 7 days on Facebook, even though at that point you weren't necessarily looking for a DIY tool. And I think that is where having a kind of constant good quality presence on a social network really comes into its own. I mean, yes.
How does that tie in with another question there? We've talked about, just coincidentally, about Facebook, about YouTube, about Google at this point, but there are other channels, aren't there? I mean, we've got LinkedIn, we've got Pinterest, we've got Twitter, which are different, aren't they?
Yeah.
I have an original conversation with you about Twitter as a micro-blogging site.
Yes.
And I think I've expressed my confusion to you on several occasions about how that's really valuable to a business, except as providing a constant noise, the thing in the past we used to call PR.
Well, I think the key thing is when you're using something like Twitter, and actually even when you're using something like Facebook, is you're just not talking about yourself. You're actually sharing content of genuine interest, and that is genuine interest to your intended audience. By following this Twitter feed, am I going to be presented with posts and tweets and information that I want to engage with? And if the answer is yes, I can.
If I was a cynic here, though, Nick, would I be valid in saying, well, just because it's of interest to me at the moment, does that really mean it's of interest to anyone else?
Well, no, but I mean, what I mean is, if you're a good marketer, you will figure out what is of interest to the people that you want to attract, and you will tailor the messages on that Twitter feed accordingly. And not only that, it's not just about broadcasting, it's about engagement. You'd actually reach out and try and engage with people who you would want to become advocates for your brand, product, or service, or express an interest in other people.
I think that's a big message, isn't it? Because that's a big message of advertising or marketing to begin with, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got to attract attention, but then the second most fundamental thing you do is generate interest in what it is. And I think that a lot of businesses, both you and I agree on this, are reluctant to generate interest. They just want to shout a message without really engaging their customer or potential customer.
I mean, you've got to have a conversation ultimately, and that takes time and effort. But I think a good analogy is just think about how one behaves at, say, something like a dinner party or something like that.
Outrageously.
Yeah, outrageously, hopefully. That's one way of getting attention. But if you're talking to someone and all they're doing is talking about themselves and droning on about the same things again and again and again, you tend to avoid sitting down to that person, or you move away in the party and you end up talking to someone else. Whereas if actually you're being quite discursive and intelligent and insightful and asking questions back, that a person's more likely to retain its audience.
That's a very interesting point you make there, and absolutely true, which is that actually the good marketer listens very well. Do you think there's a place for listening on social media for companies, that they should be?
Completely. I mean, I think that is half the work. And before you even post your sort of first tweet, as it were, you have to have a clear idea of what kind of audience you're looking to attract, and that would require some desk research, as it were, seeing how other companies in the same sector as you market themselves online, and see what works, see what doesn't, see what you can do differently, and continually revise that. And I think again, this is probably a topic for another conversation because it's so vast, but marrying up your social media activity with good analysis of your analytics, by doing social media, by posting on these messages, are we increasing the number of followers, are we getting an increased number of likes, and more importantly, is the content that we're sharing driving people to, say, a central website, or driving people to email or telephone or contact a company or product in question. I know it sounds a bit soulless, but ultimately businesses are businesses, and they need to attract customers and revenue. And if all your social media activity is providing a bit of a laugh and a giggle for people and not actually generating any income, it's actually a failure, even though it might be quite effective marketing. But if it doesn't have any end result in terms of people a pickup in the services or securing a place in the marketplace, it's a bit of a failure. And the only way you know. So yeah, the only way you know if you're being successful or not is if you actually measure the analytics in the first instance, see whether or not you're increasing engagement and click-throughs to your site, and then marrying that up with some more hard and fast, key performance indicators you just associate with business.
There's another risk, isn't there, for social media that we haven't mentioned, which is that, of course, the folks, Facebook and Google in particular, will judge what's going on according to the response.
Oh yes.
The comment thing is something that, what used to be a private message to the maker of the washing machine to say it didn't work very well, and your service agent wasn't very good, all of a sudden can be broadcast to hundreds of thousands of people. That is, you can do endless brand damage can be done very fast in a way that it couldn't be done in the past.
Yes, and it can be done by others, as you rightly say, people sounding off about poor customer service, but actually it can be done by brands themselves by being a bit too complacent and not being on the ball with their social media marketing. Yeah. And I think the real bane of social media marketing can be sort of excessive auto-scheduling, where you've got sort of marketing messages sort of mapped out weeks in advance, and the real world changes around that. So you can have some very inopportune messages going out at inopportune times. So, for example, a supermarket at the height of the horse meat scandal in the UK, which is a horse meat being substituted for beef in certain products. I think one of the supermarkets, the tweet when the story was at its peak, one of the supermarkets tweeted, "Well, we're just about to hit the hay. We're signing off for the night." Which just sort of invites itself, and actually in a more sort of tragic way. I think one of the pro-gun lobbies in the US on the day of that dreadful shooting last year, sort of had a tweet saying, "What a great day for shooting! What are you up to today?" And of course, that person sort of had scheduled that tweet in all innocence of what was going to happen, but it took on a very different context, unbeknownst to them, because of real-world events. And I think
as marketers, we're never quite going to get rid of hubris, are we? We're never going to.
No. I think it's a matter of having the sensitivity and doing continual review. Is what we decided on Monday still appropriate for the following Monday?
Yeah. There was another thought that I had, almost in a way to start to wrap this up, was one social media channel we haven't mentioned, LinkedIn. And I'm quite a fan of LinkedIn. I'm quite a fan of LinkedIn because I think it is obvious to a business person that they can target an individual or business in a way that it's not immediately obvious on the other channels. And I just wanted to ask what you felt about, particularly about the virtues of LinkedIn, but because in a way I think they're self-evident. You know what I mean? If I want to find Nick Lewis on LinkedIn, I will find him. I know he's there because he's interested in business, and I can have a direct conversation with him. Do you think there's a value in that direct contact there, which is a little bit missing when it comes to the more genuine social media sites like Twitter, Facebook, and so on?
Yes, I mean, I think because you're clearly identified as an individual rather than a company in a business context on a social network, it is easier to have that conversation because, for example, a lot of business professionals do have their own professional Twitter feed, but they also have their own personal Twitter feed, and Twitter, by its very nature, has its limitations in 140 characters, and whereas LinkedIn, especially the more premium versions of LinkedIn, have lots of avenues of approach. You can either sort of publicly comment on someone else's post, you can engage with people in LinkedIn groups, you can build up a reputation, you can be asked to be introduced to mutual contacts, and it's a great way of reaching out and communicating and assessing people and developing B2B relationships.
I was thinking about how relatively easy it is to understand its purpose.
Yes, I mean, from the outset, it is clearly registered as a professional to professional network.
That's right, because it started out as essentially a place for people to recruit and to be recruited.
Yes,
and that's its startup attempt, so to speak. Then people, business people who go on there. I just mention it because when we're trying to advise our clients on which of the social media channels to go to, I think sometimes it's forgotten.
Yes.
And secondly, I think it is more difficult as a marketer to explain to people the value of Facebook, even people who are heavy users of LinkedIn, to explain to them why they should use Facebook and why they should use Google Plus or Twitter in the same circumstance.
Yeah, that's great. I totally agree with that. But what I suggest is we probably have a dedicated conversation on LinkedIn in the very near future.
That's very neat. Very neat way to wrap it up.
Well, the reason why is I think my laptop's about to die because I didn't actually bring out my charger with me, and I've got 10% power, and I know when it gets to 10% power, it dies. So we're going to edit this bit out.
Let's avoid Nick Lewis dying on air, shall we?
Yeah, shall we do that? So, well, Richard, thanks very much for joining me today for the chat, and hopefully it'll be the first of many. And if people want to sort of see either any of my work or Richard's work, there'll be some credits at the end of this video, which you can sort of follow us and see other discussions that we've had.
That's great. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Richard.